And that's what I'm finding for myself too, is that you as you start to make inroads in your career, different things come to you that you didn't even know existed.
Welcome to Owning Your Legacy podcast. I am so excited to have you. So, Natalie, if you don't mind, will you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Yes, I'm Natalie McGrady. Everyone in my family calls me Chantel. That's why it says Natalie Chantel McGrady on my LinkedIn. But I am a supplier diversity leader at Cargill and a mother of three and a wife of one.
For our listeners, I would love to hear your amazing story and how you got to where you are.
Well, I'm a young lady from upstate New York, a small town called Corning, and that is the headquarters of Corning Incorporated. And I was fourth generation Corning Incorporated employee of my family. So I worked there for 13 years after graduating from college at Hampton University, HBCU in Hampton, Virginia. And I ended up working just a couple years for Honeywell in Boston, but then I ended up back in Corning after getting laid off from Honeywell to work for Corning Incorporated. So I was a buyer trainee. I was put right into a leadership role, developed to lead and to run procurement at facilities. And so that was my introduction to kind of leadership roles and really being part of a team that I was not always the most senior person. I was usually the youngest person, but I was thrust into that world through this buyer training program.
Because you just have such amazing leadership qualities.
I was number two. There were two of us, both women. This other young lady went to West Point, and she was a bad babe. I mean, she could shoot guns, she ran, she did everything. And then I came in kind of the little diva, but I was the second person in the program. We really became great friends, and we helped develop that program. And then we both ran that program for a couple years each as we matriculated through Cargill, or I'm sorry, Corning. Yeah.
That's so cool. So I want to back up the bus on your childhood because you know I love the story about your dad and your mom, quite frankly, and you and all your sisters. So talk a little bit about what it was like growing up there.
Well, we were living in South Corning, which is where most of the Black families lived. My father was born and raised in Corning. My mother was actually born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she went to Tuskegee University, at that time, Tuskegee Institute, and that was in the 40s. And she was a dietary nutrition major.
That's my major.
I know, right? I just
I
thought that
love
was
that.
so interesting. Yeah. And so, but at that time, and at HBCUs, specifically at Tuskegee, it was either dietary or you went into some type of trade. And they were really being developed to work in kitchens. And so she ended up working in several kitchens, and she ended up at Corning as an intern. And she had several internships, which I find fascinating. My mother is 97, alive and well, and she's
Amazing.
doing well, and she has an amazing mind. And so we talk a lot about her experiences growing up. But she came to Corning as an intern. All the young ladies lived at someone's house, a boarding house. Of one of the families in Corning. And on Sundays after church, they would have teas. And so that's how she met my father. And it was
So
love at first
cute.
sight. Yeah, he was, he didn't go to college. He was working. He had, been in the military. He was a World War II vet. He actually was in several major combat events with World War II over in Europe. And so he would be
Wow.
just tickled to see the Doomsday or the D-Day folks that are here that are, there's only, I think, 40 still living that were part
Yeah.
of that. So he was in that number of those great heroes. But so that's how they met. And so they ended up settling in Corning and having six girls. I'm the youngest of six. I'm the only one that was born after the civil rights vote and after our right to vote. actually. And so
Right.
all my sisters are baby boomers, and so I'm the only one that's not. So it's just a different kind of attitude around life in general. I thought I could do
Yeah.
anything. I could go anywhere I wanted to. I had, even though I lived on Tuxell Avenue, most of my friends lived someplace else. I would hang out with all the kids. It was a small town, so all the executives' children for Corning lived there. We all went to school together. So I really never thought about being African American and being a Black girl in that small town. It really didn't come up a lot until you hit, high school. And so
Mm.
that's when I decided, yeah, I'm out of here. I'm going to HBCU. But I did everything. I was a cheerleader. I played softball. You name it, I did it. I was in plays, chorus. I did it all. And that was really my parents. All my sisters did that as well.
How close in age are you and your sisters? Like, are you all pretty close in age?
No, the oldest is 16 years older than me. So, and we
Yeah.
tease her, I could be her daughter. And she treats me like
Ah.
I could be her kid. And then so I have a nephew who's 50 and I'm 57. So,
Yeah.
so she got married when I was 4. And then the next one next to me is 4 years older than me. So my parents really spaced out the children. Yeah.
So were the others were closer, like in a row, kind of,
Yeah,
I
the
bet,
first
like just
4
like mine.
were
Yeah.
very close in age, and then there's
Yeah.
4 years between the next one and then 4 years again, and so they didn't stop trying for that boy. I was supposed to be the boy.
They got lucky with you. So yeah, I think that's so true because I have shared with you I'm the youngest of 7. We're very similar, we're exactly almost the same age, but um, so yeah, but it does feel like different families. I think just from that separation, sometimes like there's things that happen that you and I just we weren't even born yet. We didn't even know about
Right.
it.
Right, and we didn't have the same life experience or lived experience. My sisters all basically integrated, schools. I mean, they were my sister Jean, the oldest, she was, went to CFA. All my cousins and everyone went to CFA, but that was the first time they had went to a bigger high school, and she was one of the first classes to graduate that high school with a handful of other Black children. It's still a very pretty much white town,
Right.
similar to Minneapolis and where we live in a small town in Victoria, Minnesota, here in Minnesota. So, so
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. I roll with it. This is where we
Oh
live, and
yeah.
you do what you do, right? You have to find places that are welcoming, that your children can thrive, that afford you a good living, and so that's what we made those choices in our lives.
And I think that your childhood made you fearless, as I think you definitely are. And so, when was the first time that you really felt any different, or that you couldn't do what anyone else could do because of your color? Was there an event in your mind?
Yeah, when I turned 16, all my girlfriends were going to get jobs on our little street in Corning called Market Street. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to get a job on Market Street with everyone else so we can hang out and take our lunches together. And my mom never said a word, but after she told me, you were never going to get a job on Market Street because they weren't going to hire you. You're a Black girl. Even though my parents were very prominent members of society in Corning, my father was the director of community relations. It was a job that was created for him by the Corning Foundation after the death of Martin Luther King, and so he had that role for 30 years or something. And so when it was time for me to take that job, I would take a job at 16. I never thought that I couldn't get hired because of the color of my skin.
And what did they say to you? I mean, so you're like, I mean, you're
They just took my
absolutely.
application.
They took it, or they wouldn't take it.
And they don't no, they took it and they said, "Thank you," but I never got a call back. I followed up, and so then my mother, did what she would do, is she went down to our local food mart and said, "Chantel," that's what my family calls me, "Chantel's 16, she needs a job," and I ended up working as a cashier at the food mart. While everybody else was working at these cute little boutiques and working with tourists, I was at the food mart. none of them knew or understood that I didn't get the job because I was a little black girl. And it took me a minute to figure it out. And that's really when I said, I got to get out of this town. I want to go to college. I don't want to go to a traditional white institution. I really said at that point, I want to go to HBCU and be somewhere where everyone looks like me. And it was amazing, but it was also scary because I had never been any place like that outside of church or a family reunion, but every day, almost for 4 years, this was my life.
Wow.
Majority group, we had our, all my girlfriends from college were still very close. It was just a very different place. And it was also at the time of the Cosby Show, and then A
Oh,
Different World
yeah.
highlighted HBCUs. That was really the interesting part of it. We were living that. And now to see the resurgence of that after the death of George Floyd has been very interesting and exciting. But none of my kids went to HBCU. My husband didn't either. I'm the only one. So,
Yeah. And I think it sounds like it was probably great for you to have kind of both of those experiences, you know?
yeah.
Kind of having that moment to be like, I'm going to try this too. And then, so then when you graduated, was it kind of shocking to get into the working world for you at any
Yeah,
point?
no, because I had
No.
already worked in that world. I had lived that world. So that was
Right.
one of the things that I found interesting is that some of my friends who went to small, mostly white towns after graduating, um, did struggle because it was so isolating. And then a group of people went back home. So a lot of my friends were from New York City, New Jersey, Newark, or uh, friends from Maryland, they all went back to where they grew up. And so they had already lived this. And then I was going off to Boston. And another one of my girlfriends went to Connecticut, and we used to get together, and we would meet. But it was tough for people who had not grown up like that to just walk into that world. It can be very isolating.
I bet. And the only thing I'm thinking of when you say that is I went to a really, really small Catholic school through eighth grade. So kindergarten, eighth grade, graduating class of 36, and then high school into like a big, huge, 5,000 people high school. And it was very overwhelming. It was just, you're in
Yeah.
such a bubble. And then you're like, oh my God, this is like the real world. And yeah.
And you have to make new friends and you have to be open to making friends. So I've always been able to make friends and meet people. So my first job was in Boston. I worked for Honeywell in Lexington, Massachusetts, another small, sleepy suburb of Boston, and it was very white. It
Yeah.
was very white, but I loved it because it was so historic. The farmers markets, just being able to drive and see all the greenery and the landscape. It was just beautiful, and so I was able to do okay there. I mean, I thrived as far as I got laid off, but everybody did. But it
Yeah.
was still a place where I could grow and thrive. And then going back to Corning after that, I was able to jump in and really understand. And I knew people. I've never been afraid to talk to executives. I think are those programs, those management development or those sales management programs get you to a place where you're used to having conversations with leaders. And I think that's important. And so throughout my career, I've been able to be in those types of situations where and I knew these people growing up. So it wasn't like, oh my God, those coming in. I knew the CEO.
Right. I think that's great advice for listeners, especially young listeners. It's like, don't be afraid to speak to executives. It's so important.
They're just people. And they're not always that smart. I mean, you think about it. Some of them really
I,
are just, I think it was Michelle Obama who said once she got into those rooms, she was like, really? This is,
this is what I was afraid of. There's nothing to be afraid of.
they're just people. They become experts in a certain subject, but it doesn't mean that they're geniuses and you should be intimidated. I really think that you,
My mom used to say that to me too, of like, and I think it's, it totally does impact you the way you grow up because I was thrown into situations like that quite often of a table of men that I had to entertain, at dinner at 9 or 10 or 11. Like, I don't know what the hell I was doing. And my dad just like threw me at this table like I did to Kevin at just when you met
Mhm.
him.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You got to do it. You just got to jump in.
Yeah, and so for us, we moved, after Corning. I met Bill, my husband, Bill Wiley, at Corning, and well, we I was working for Corning in Virginia, so that was another move. I moved to Virginia by myself, back to Virginia, but in Blacksburg, Virginia, in the mountains of it was a valley, but in Virginia, that part of Virginia, which also was the home of Virginia Tech, and that's where he was. He was getting his
Okay.
master's there. So I met him, and we ended up both staying and working for Corning, but going back to Corning Incorporated in
Okay.
Corning. So we've moved as a couple. We've moved our children a couple times as a family, and I think that's also helped my kids to be able to walk into rooms and just
Yeah.
to right.
So talk about, having kids and because it sounds like you had three pretty darn quickly. And like, how did that go for you?
It was interesting because someone's career has to, well, this is what I was told. Someone's career has to take a step back and or you stop working, right? And at that point, it was rare for a man to stop working. Now, a
Right.
lot of women I know who are senior executives, their husbands don't work, or and at that point, that wasn't something that my husband was willing to do, to say you go and get your career going. And so whenever we moved for his job, and I would always work, but I would just always work, right? It wasn't like I
Right.
was going for the big roles. I would just find a job on Monster and I would work. I ended up, though, because of, I think, my confidence, my personality, I will always end up leading people or teams or leading projects. And so it just always worked out. I only had one bad job, and that was, I don't want to name the name of it, but it was awful. But even in that job, I was still leading and developing people and made the best of it.
So I think that's interesting, Natalie, though. You were, obviously having the babies and following your husband, but then you would always land on your feet and end up in the leadership. It was like screaming at you. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
it was.
right. And my kids would see it, and I would say, and this one woman said to me, she said, when I came to Cargill, she said, "Wow, your daughter is seeing you work through all these moves." Because they were all trying to figure out, like, are you a military family? Like, why did you move all the time? And it was really, we were chasing our dreams and trying to figure out where we wanted to be, but we would always land on our feet, and it was a great move. It was always a corporate move. So my daughter, she's the oldest. She thought everyone moved with movers coming in their house and packing their clothes in wardrobe boxes, and it was just like, no, this isn't everyone. This is a corporate move. It was just so funny to watch her think that this is normal. And our boys would make friends, and we would put them in different camps, had different experiences. So I think it was important to be able to do that, and for them to be able to leave. So our oldest son is in LA. I mean, he's out there, he's making it work, he's figuring it out, and I think that's great. And our youngest son is like, I don't want any parts of that corporate life.
Mm-hmm.
I want to work in manufacturing, and that's it. And so they have these choices. Whereas I think if we had just stayed where we were, it may have been a little bit different for them.
And was there ever a time that I should know the answer to this, but I don't think I do. But is there ever a time that your career took front seat to your husband's career?
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Was it Cargill or was it?
It was Cargill. It was actually when we first moved here the first time. We've been here twice. So when I worked at Deluxe. I went for just a job to be a buyer. He had come here as a process engineer, and I got the job. But when I walked in, I had a team of 10 people. I was like, what? How did that happen? That's not what I interviewed for. So I ended up having this, and we were working on pretty far from our home and where our kids were every day. And that's something I think when you don't have family, you have to rely on neighbors and the schools. But we started having nannies. And so that was
Okay.
something that was new and that wasn't normal in my family. So people would say, "You have a nanny? Why do you have a nanny?" Well, we work 30 miles away, and if we get caught in traffic, you can't get home. So you need someone you could depend on. So we started with nannies, and so that's when I would say my our careers were kind of going like this, back and
Right.
forth. And but it's been great because we would talk about work and we could bounce ideas off of each other. Even though he's brilliant, he has a master's in statistics, and what he talks about I can't even talk about. So,
Right.
and then,
Right.
but I
Nor
talk
would I
about
really, nor would I want
in
to, quite
procurement.
right.
Yeah, right. So my procurement simplistic talk is like he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But no, it was that was when it did, and then I took a step back when we moved to Florida, and
Okay.
that's when it was miserable. But I was still moving in the right direction, and then he got laid off. And so, your life, that it's just life happening. And so you have to adjust. And, I told him, I said, you have till Monday. And it was Friday. I said, you have till Monday to mope. And then that's it. That's it. You got to
Um,
get with it, do some housework, or, you can't just watch TV all day, So he
no,
was on
that's
it.
not going to work. No.
Yeah, no. And he was working like three jobs. I mean, this guy, he was all over it because we both know that we have to make this work. And then he ended up getting a job back here. He works at Medtronic, and the rest is history. I've been at Cargill ever since for 13 years. So
And that was probably really good, particularly for your daughter to see, you know.
and my son,
Yeah. And your sons. Yes, I think
because
that too.
his
Yes.
fiance, she has a master's, she has speech pathology master's. She is a go-getter. Her mom is a go-getter. Her mom's a pharmacist. I mean, so
Yeah.
he didn't shy away from someone who could be the breadwinner, or he didn't
Yeah.
shy away from someone who has a thought about how she wants her career and her life to go. And it's very
Yeah.
interesting because I see him collaborating with her.
True partnership, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. So proud of them. Yeah, I'm so proud of them.
This whole generation seems so much more open to that, which thank God, thank God. I mean, yeah.
Because I think a lot of us worked. I think a lot of us worked. All my girlfriends.
It was funny. I was having a conversation yesterday with one of the guests, and she said to me, "This is like profound. I felt exactly this way, but especially when my kids were little, I acted like when I was a mom, I didn't work, and when I was at work, I acted like an employee that wasn't a mother. Like the two. I remember going on play dates specifically with the boys when they were younger, and I lived in a town at that point that the moms really didn't work. There was two, of course, that I were my neighbors. Thank God that I stuck by them, because I felt like an alien a little bit, and I had a nanny too, but I didn't really talk about it. You kind of just, no, no, I got this, I got it all. But yeah, so
Yeah,
I
oh
think
yeah.
this is definitely good stuff. So one thing I was thinking about, I love the confidence and how the confidence landed you in a lot of these leadership positions, but I know you've said sometimes that's needs to be tempered. So I want you to talk about that, and then I want you to and on the flip side of it, how to remain confident and not lose your shine or not let anyone take your shine.
Well, I'll tell you what. There was a time at Cargill, in particular, and and I love the company, and I love the culture. I believe that Cargill really does care about us as individuals. I mean, we all have missteps, but I really think most of the time it's what they care about. But there was a time at Cargill where we were changing leadership, and I came in leading some business procurement. I worked with all the businesses and their presidents of the business. And this was a time where Cargill had a lot of businesses, and now they've consolidated. We have enterprises, but I had three of them and was doing well and led all of our procurement activities and had a team. And then we got new leadership that had an idea of where things could go and who should be in leadership, what a leader looks like. And it didn't look like me. And so I have an accounting degree. I don't have an advanced degree, but I had the years of experience in the work, but it really didn't look like me. So everyone they put in these leadership roles that were the same person, basically, you know,
Yeah.
and they were engineers, so everyone needed to be an engineer or whatever their experiences were. So they moved me into kind of center of excellence person. I like tools and technology, so that was the reasoning. And then another leader came in and didn't see me as a tools and technology person because I didn't have an IT degree. But I know how tools should be used. I rolled out multiple procurement tools. So they ended up saying, "Hey, we want you just to run you," and I say just, but they want you to run supplier diversity. And I said, "Well, I never had an interest in supplier diversity." And they were like, "Well, we are interested in you running supplier
We are
diversity."
interested in you having an interest in biodiversity.
Right. And so at that point, it was stay and make this work or leave. And the guy who ran it before, John Taylor, he's like a legend. And I
Yes.
was, dumbfounded. I really didn't know anything about it. So that's how I ended up in supplier diversity. And I really think at that point, I started to lose my confidence. And
Ah,
it was like the black person job at the company.
yeah.
Um, I didn't have a community. I didn't know anyone in supplier diversity besides JT and Darren, another guy, Darren Harmon.
Yes,
But
I
for
know
the most
Darren
part,
Harmon. Yes.
I was alone and I didn't know anyone. And at Cargill, I would say at that point, we were just kind of ticking away, doing the work after JT left, but we weren't really doing the work, right? We were making sure we
Right.
reported, we complied. And so
You didn't
I
know the
had
power of it, it sounds like. You didn't know the
I had
power of it.
no idea the power of it. And
Yeah.
so I went to a conference, and the lady that worked with me at that time, she was kind of like, "Let's go to this conference. You'll figure it out." We get there, and I was like, "Okay, wait a minute. This is amazing. Who are all these people running around here?" And it felt like I was back at Hampton. Everyone was working for the cause. We wanted to make sure that other people were brought to the table. They had opportunities. How do we open up doors for them? And it really was my personality that I didn't even know that I could have a job that did all the things I like to do. So that's really what happened. And at the same time, I didn't feel like I was being developed at Cargill. I didn't feel like they were taking me seriously as a leader. So I started to do board work. And this board gave me a chance, which was amazing. And it's called Nexus Youth and Family Solutions. And it was huge nonprofit, $100 million nonprofit, which I didn't even know existed in Minnesota.
Wow.
And it was all around health equity and making sure that the young people that we were working with were supported, that they were able to grow. We had residential psychiatric centers that we led, I mean, in 5 states. And I'm like, wait a
Wow.
minute, what kind of job is this? Where'd I get? And it really developed my leadership of working with people from all walks of life. Some of our board members were business owners, some of them came up through the system, some of them, were lawyers. And so you just had all these different people. And I ended up being the board chair through a very difficult time of looking for a CEO. And, it was very interesting. And I met so many great people through that. And so I was able to take those leadership experiences and bring them back to Cargill.
But I think that board work, you found your shine again, maybe a little bit, and then you applied it back at Cargill and went, okay, now I'm going to make something happen here. And
And that's what happened. I started to step up. I led our Cargill Women's Network for our events. We had International Women's Day. I did that several years. There's a lot of recognition that goes with, working with your business resource groups. You get to be in front of senior leaders because they're the tags to these business resource groups.
I think I would love you to kind of break that down a little more, even for listeners, because, I'm passionate about this topic of supplier diversity and the power of it. And like, So break that down about, what your role is and what your kind of like your purpose and mission is with it.
Yeah, my purpose is economic empowerment for underrepresented minorities and women in business. And so making sure that they have an opportunity to bid on work at Cargill or an opportunity to be able to meet people who are making those decisions at Cargill. And so, and not only at Cargill, but also other companies. And so we will get together and someone will say, hey, I'm looking for a corrugated provider, or I'm looking for an ingredient. I've given your name, Ed Long's name, to
Thank
several
you. Thank you.
folks.
I
So
love that.
those are the type of things that we all do because we're all there to make sure that minority and women-owned businesses get the opportunities.
Right.
And that's what I do, and it's fun and it fits me. And being able to not only help them get the opportunity, but then also coach and mentor where it
Right.
makes, and that's also a big part of what we do as well.
And I love how it ties back to what your dad did too. I think that's just a really cool tie back that you, even when they offered you the position, that you didn't necessarily see that. It took you a minute, right?
It took
And
me 7 years.
so maybe 7 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I didn't really tie it back to what my dad did until I I I worked on this graduation speech for an organization that Cargill was affiliated with called 110, and it really is bringing 1 million Black and Brown folks into business over the next 10 years. And so this organization is a organization that's based on skills, not academic. You don't have to have a college degree. So when I was doing the speech, I was thinking of my father who did not have a college degree. My mother went to school. All the women in her family went to school, and my father had a GED because he went to World War II and he enlisted early and left high school. So he never finished. And so he didn't have a prom, he didn't, all those things. And so I was thinking about him when I was writing that speech and how his job was really out of another tragedy, which was the assassination of MLK. And I'm not saying that George Floyd was MLK, but what I am saying is because it rocked the nation so, action happened. And the action was to develop these community relations groups to be a liaison between the community and the government or the community and corporations. And so that's how his role was developed. But prior to that, my mother and father had a biracial social club that they hosted and founded with several other couples. And it was a very successful group. And that's how his name got out there as a leader in the space. And so it was really interesting. And I was saying I didn't really do that, but I remember him always having a board meeting, always, having to go here or there. And my kids are always like, you got another board meeting? What board are you on now? And so I ended up being him, not knowing I was him.
Isn't that
And
crazy how that happens?
I know that's you. That's you too.
I know,
I
right?
mean, you are your father. I mean, and you're not the oldest, you're the baby. And
Yeah.
you would think the oldest would be, but it's
Well,
you.
watch out for those babiys, right? Those babies rule the
That's
world.
exactly right. And you know what, I think the babies were always watching. Like I knew how to sneak out the house because their sisters didn't know how. I knew how to, make sure I didn't get caught if I got a bad grade. But I remember my sisters getting caught, especially the one above me. I mean, I remember. So I was like, no,
Yes.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pay attention.
Exactly. Yes. And it was so easy to like, I don't even know. I was always like thinking of my brothers and sisters. They're just like, all you got to do is go weed the garden and he's going to be ecstatic. Like they didn't ask for much, just do a little work and show a little effort. And they're like,
Yep, I would make a cake for the neighborhood boys to mow the lawn, and my dad would be happy, although he would then redo it because they didn't do it exactly right. But I was like, listen, I got it done,
one more.
good.
That's resourceful, lady.
Yeah.
So I want to finish with that one, a little more on that 110 because I'm really intrigued with that. So you did the commencement speech, and so Cargill supported this group of graduates, so to speak. Do you guys still do that? Is this still going on? Because I think it's a really
I
cool
hope so.
program.
I think we're still looking at, do we do another cohort or not? But I
Yeah,
hope so. I think it's a great program.
I do
And
too.
it really is around skills. So anyone
Right,
could do it. You could join them and join in on this aspect of it, but it's around skills. So not all of them had college degrees, not, and I
right.
think maybe one or two had an associate's degree, but they were working jobs that they could not get into corporate America. I think one young lady said she was at, Dunkin' Donuts, and she got this opportunity and she applied for it. And that's why I always say apply. All they can do is say no. My big uh, motto, or my what I always say is what my mother would say, is nothing beats a try but a failure.
Right.
So just try, and so what if you fail?
Yeah.
You
And
can
my
try
dad
again.
didn't have a degree either. I shared with you
Mm,
that before. And I do think it's a shame that, especially with how expensive college is these days, that I think it's something we all need to be looking at and working towards
yes,
making
there's other
a
ways to.
livable job, a livable
Right,
life, without having
right.
a degree.
Yeah, our youngest son did not go to college. He chose not to do that, and so we made a pact with him that, mom and dad, mostly dad, would help him manage his money. We're not giving him money. He stayed home for 2 years. He and the older boy moved out uh, in his third year, and then he got the experience of having a roommate and having to pay bills and do all that, and now he lives on his own. And so I
Oh,
think, but we gave him that opportunity to do that, whereas we didn't force him to go to college. We would
right.
love
It's
him
it's
to go to
not for everybody. It's not for
not for
everybody.
kid has
And
made it
it's
clear this is not what he wants to do. Now maybe when he's 40, he decides that's up to him. But right now,
or even, I don't know, certifications and stuff. Like I know a lot of kids that are really into IT. One of my son's really good friends, he's brilliant. And he's like, I just got certifications. He's got a great job now because the kid, he's like that War Games kind of movie kid that figured out how to create a key into my son's dorm so that he didn't have to wait for them to come down and let him in, and got in huge trouble. Yeah, got in huge trouble for it. But I'm like, that's brilliant.
that's brilliant. We need him
So
in our
yeah,
IT department. Yeah,
I want him
exactly.
in my I want him in my IT. Yeah, yeah, he's a great kid, but didn't ever get a college degree, and he's not going to need it. He's going to prove it on his talent, just like you're talking about.
Well,
You
and
know,
I think, and like your father and my father, he
brilliant
would
people, definitely
be
brilliant
able
people.
to. He brought in more blacks into,
Yeah,
positions at Corning. My uncle went right into a professional position. At the time my father was coming up, they were all the men were janitors. They go
right.
right into janitors, and my uncle was able to get into the Platinum Smith Union. I mean, so these are the things that I think those are life changing for people, and I don't think we think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've told you this. I've probably said this a million times on this podcast too. But I love my dad hiring the mailman who was Henry Collins, his soulmate in life, 6'6" black man that was like my second father, and literally was the mailman at Edlong when we were on Huron Street. My dad called him when they moved to Elk Grove and said, "Hey, you want to be my, operations manager, my lead?" And he was like, "What?" And they were together for 40 years, I think.
Yep.
Died within like weeks of each other. Like I swear to God, there was just a soul connection on these two men. And taught me a lot, I mean, that definitely taught me a lot. And it's the lives we touch, right? And Natalie, your job is just, I like the supplier diversity angle. And I know that, I've talked to Michael on this podcast. I think he's the only other supplier diversity that I've talked to, Michael
Michael
Byron.
Byron.
Yeah, I
Oh,
love Michael
I love him.
Byron. I do
He's
too.
another giant in supplier. There was someone I learned a
Giant,
lot
yes.
from. Yeah,
Yeah. And he's so generous with connections, with teaching, with all of that. I mean, I think
he is.
great human, and he still is. I mean, even though he's retired, he's definitely still. I've recently reached out to him. Yeah,
I
yeah.
see him every other month on conference board. He's our
Uh,
supplier diversity leadership council lead for conference. I mean, it's great.
I'm so
And so
glad.
that's the other thing. There's a life after supplier diversity, and so my
Yes.
thing was, do I want to do this forever? Do I want to do something else? How do you get into different roles? And he's proving that you can do that. You can, move on
Yeah.
and do something else. I thought it was great.
That's beautiful. So that leads us to kind of our wrap up thing, but I got two little wrap up questions for you. But so we didn't really touch on too much. It's not just dinner, and maybe you
Oh,
describe it
let's
for
talk
our
about
listeners.
it.
That just
I
for yes.
know. I love it's not just dinner, and I love how Brooke always gives me credit for you two. I just crashed your dinner. Someone I didn't want to go to a big event, so I just crashed your dinner, and we're all at this place, and I'm all about. My daughter will tell you what are we doing? Why are we here? Is there a and you guys were like, we're just having a cocktail. We just want everybody to come in and say hello. And I'm like, this is a powerful room. Are you kidding me? So that's
It was
how
a
I was
powerful
just
room.
being myself, being
No,
crap.
you were great. You were great on the vision because I'd say that Brooke and I struggle a little bit with ADHD from time to time.
Me too.
Yeah, we all do. But
Mhm.
you really helped us like solidify from a corporate mind what is the purpose of this and what do you because you're right. It was a powerful room, a lot of power in that room to make a difference. And I love where it's gone.
And
So
a
yeah.
difference you have made. I mean, this
Yeah.
is the,
Oh, I
we
got
ended up
chills. I love
becoming
that.
a nonprofit. I mean, we made it. We
Yes.
did it all through COVID. Like one
Yes.
tree was probably in the other videos this high, and now look at it. And we were able to, I mean, what, 9 to 12 women give scholarships to come to uh, WeBank or NMSDC to be able to, highlight and showcase who they are. And WeBank is Women Business Economic National Council. I know, and I was going to say,
That's so funny. I was just looking at Natalie over there because she's like,
yeah,
oh, they're doing that goddamn thing again where
yeah,
they use acronyms. And so that one is the hardest one.
yeah.
Women Business Enterprise National Council, I think
Enterprise National
is.
Council,
And
and MSDC is National Minority Supplier Development Council. So they're
so
the
for
two
our
biggest.
listeners, we got to kind of say, and we've done this before, but so it's the certifying bodies that
For,
certify minority business. So when
mhm,
they go to corporate companies like Cargill, Nestle, Pepsi, what have you, you're certified, and the corporates have usually an amount that they want to continue to
mhm,
grow that they spend with diverse suppliers.
right.
So it is scary. It's not just dinner; is like a little subset that we're talking about that we started because it is so incredibly scary. The first time I walked into a wee bank as a
Intimidating.
Ed Long, oh, it's intimidating, so
Yeah.
intimidating. There's a million companies, so there's not just food. There's Johnson Controls, Boeing airplanes, and all sorts of industries that
Everybody is there, and
yes,
you walk in, and if you don't have a course or a plan of who you want to talk to, it doesn't
or a
work out.
friendly
And
face, a friendly
And I
freaking
will
face.
tell you, some of our supplier diversity people, I always say everybody's not the one for you. So you have to
Right,
figure out who's really going to actually fight for you, not only for their company, but other places. Like I said, we're all in industry
right,
groups. And so it's not just dinner, is industry agnostic, which I love about it. And I think it's also you don't have to just be you have to be a woman. That's it, right? We're not saying anything else, but you have to be a woman. And so we have veteran women, we have LGBTQ women, we have disabled women, we have minority women and Caucasian women. I mean, you have to be a woman, and we want everyone to
right.
apply and be part of it. And the scholarship is a curated experience, which I think is wonderful. We buddy you up with someone. We make sure you have a mentor through that weekend. We do a prep class where Brooke does her whole Brooke Foley, our fearless leader. We love her. She does a prep class for them, and I think it's one of the best to get people ready. And
It really is because you got to know if you're not big enough to sell to a Cargill, and that's totally okay too. Because there's other WeBank companies, women-owned businesses that would be great potential customers for you. So it's a very collaborative.
the minority business enterprise. I think that gets missed a lot because people want to just I want to sell to Cargill. Well, it's going to be
I
hard to.
am a huge believer in it, and some of you corporates, which is great, keep hold us accountable to that. That what's
Mhm.
your diverse spend, and I feel like that I got to walk the talk. If I'm
Yeah,
trying to do that, I got to do it too. But my question on okay, I think we did a good job of explaining what, and we'd love more people to join us.
we would love more people to join us.
We would love more, and we're so much fun, as you can tell. It's
We
a great.
had so fun. Our dinner started out with
Like six of
two
us.
tables,
And
and
now
now
it's like we blow up a room now. It's
mhm.
insane. It's a big room, like 100 people or more. I
Yeah,
think we have.
people
I
want
think
they. This is invite only. I mean, we are. Yeah.
I know. Oh God, I can't remember who in the last one I just invited. And like, it's all over town about this dinner. I know about this
Mhm.
dinner. I'm like, yay! But
How
what
did
do
I
you
get an
think? I know, right? We love that. What is the legacy that you and me and Brooke and the rest of us should leave behind in terms of that? Either in terms of we bank diversity, it's not just dinner. Like, what's your vision on that of the legacy that you want to leave behind in terms of diversity? I guess.
Yeah, I think I want it to be better than when I started. I think when we started, I would say, the bigs were very segregated, like not in a bad way, but they were only working for their constituents, right? If you were in NGLCC, it was just the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. They were, really focused on their constituents. And then over time, what I've seen is they've figured out we have to work together. And I think that is the legacy that all of us in this generation of diversity leaders are finding out is that you cannot just work by yourself and make change. You have to work with like minded people who want that change. And that's what I want the legacy to be. I think at
Okay.
Cargill, what I've been able to do is really balance the internal and external presence. I think that's a skill that I had to develop. It was easier for me to go out and talk than to be in and talk about it and talk about the successes. And so that's
Ooh,
that I think
that's
we
big.
all have to work on. But I think it's that we all work together.
And you should have some of your, and maybe you do this and I don't know it, but some of your suppliers or potential suppliers. Meaning, I would love to come, have us come in and talk about the importance of it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
And
that
the
could be
one
kind of
thing that
cool.
we've been able to do is to really look at, who's in our supplier base. And I don't I always say supplier diversity is more than a number, and that's another legacy I want to leave.
Oh my
It's
God, you're singing to the choir, lady. Singing to
Yes,
the choir.
the outcomes is really what it is. It's not who did you touch and how did it work out. So for us, it's not just dinner. We want to know the folks who have won scholarships. What did happen? What happened after that?
Right.
And it was very interesting. One of the scholarship winners said to me, "Hey, I work with Cargill and I buy chocolate or flour or something from us." And I said, "Well, do they know you're a small business, minority owned business?" And she said, "Well, I don't think so." I said, "Well, tell them." And she did. And she was like, "Oh, we got a little discount." I mean, it's just little things, right?
Right. Right.
So it's just like things like that where I didn't have to say anything to anybody internally. It was just, working with whatever broker they work with. They just were talking about it and they were like, "Oh, we do have a program."
And by the way, is
So
there
just
anyone that you're like incredibly proud of that you've brought into the Cargill Circle or anything that, you're like, that was
ask.
brilliant?
Yeah, we started this program, and I have to give my boss, my old boss, um, credit. He's just left Cargill. His name is Ben Tran. He was the one that said, "Well, who are our top suppliers, and what do we do for them?" I mean, he just said that one day, and I was like, "What do we do for them?" Right? And so we started this top to top, where we at least once a year we would have to meet with those top diverse suppliers in each category, and then not only meet with them but do a performance review, and then make sure that we are doing whatever corrective action comes out of it. How do we grow them? And they would tell us what they're doing with other companies that could help Cargill, and give us success stories or case studies. And so
Oh,
that was really,
that's a great idea. I
yeah.
love
And so
that.
what's come out of that is our friend Mike Aggiano, which Supply
Mm-hmm.
they are now going to help us do that for our top 30 suppliers. And the beauty of it is because McDonald's is using
Yes.
them for their marketplace DEI, and we're part of it. And so it just comes all full circle. And we've been able to leverage that not only for us, but our customer relationship. I mean, just everything comes together. And I think like I said, everybody working together for those goals, it will
Right.
help us in the long run. Yeah.
It's like it's an ecosystem. I love that in collaboration. It all does. It's just our world is really rather small, quite
It
frankly.
really is
It
small. We
really
all know
it's
each other and we
um,
all love each other. I think it's
it's
great. I think that what we're doing is life changing for people. I think it's not just dinner, changes
yeah,
the lives of those scholarship winners. They did not even know, in most cases, what existed with these events that we go to.
totally true. Okay, last question. What is the legacy that Natalie wants to leave behind?
I really want my children. It's very interesting because I do ancestry and you can go down a rabbit hole in ancestry. And what I found
Yes.
out is on my father's side of the family, all the men were functionally illiterate. And I mean, I'm the youngest of six. My dad would be 100 years old if he was alive, right? So in that, I'm going back to my grandfather who died in 1972, his father, and his father. They
Wow.
all came from the South, 50, 60 years out of slavery or what have you, and were functional illiterates. They just went to work. They worked.
Wow.
And so I want that legacy to be known. And so that my family knows, my kids know how far we've come as a family and our ancestry and who's holding us up, whose shoulders are we standing on of
Oh, I
these men
love that.
who are working. And then on my mother's side of the family, her family was all educated. Even all the men could read. And so it's just very interesting, just the difference of when you left the South versus when you were there. So that's part
Right.
of the I want my
And I
children.
love how you talk too about your mom was educated and your dad wasn't, but your dad always made more than your mom, which is another interesting little
Which is
tidbit.
very right because once he got into that realm, it's a totally different world. And I think, and that's what I'm finding for myself too, is that you as you start to make inroads in your career, different things come to you that you didn't even know existed.
Well, how about this
And
podcast, lady? Like, seriously, like, there's no way when I met you, however many years ago, if you said, "Oh, you're gonna be doing a podcast," I'd be like, "No, I'm not. What are you talking about?" So
I
yeah,
know.
it's weird how shit happens. It's weird.
But it happened because your life is changing.
Mm-hmm.
You've had some life experiences that are different. I'm a grandmother now, and so I really
Me
do
too.
think about
Love it.
life, what I want her to know about me when I'm gone, right? And I think I didn't know some of these
Mm.
things about my parents, except that I read them in newspaper
I think
articles.
you need to. I think you need to write a book. I think you got to write a
Yeah,
book too. You
that
do.
would be
You've got
great.
you got a great story there. I think that's so
We
true.
need to write up my sisters. I have a sister and a brother-in-law who are all editors. They have journalism PhDs or whatever. So they could, I mean, we should write a book. But I
You
do
sh-
think that the legacy is what can I leave my family better off than when I left? And do they understand our purpose? And that
yeah.
purpose for me has always been to help people, to develop people, to change lives. I mean, just
Yeah.
interns,
I was
whatever.
when I was like researching your stuff. It's one point I wrote like rooting for the underdog, and I was more thinking of my dad too. Always like And I would love to carry that on. I think that is like it's in my DNA. I think it's in a lot of our DNA. And when you say standing on the shoulders of those that came, our ancestries, there's a lot of what I've heard and read, and like we do carry this in our DNA, good and bad. Some of it's
Right.
some of it's like the bad stuff that we have to, abuse or whatever, like shed and get it out of our DNA. But I think the only way to do that is talk about it and be aware of it and bring it out of the shadows. It's got to come to the light, good and
Hmm.
bad.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you doing this podcast opens up your your father's life in a different way, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
think people knew how his company came about. I mean, like you said, he wasn't a chemist or a biology
Mm-hmm.
person. It just
Yes.
happened. And he was just a smart guy, and it just happened. And the same thing with
Yeah.
my father. He did not go to school. He could have been a lawyer in a different time. He wasn't afforded the GI Bill because he was African American. He didn't get the home loan, the VA loan for a home. They had to buy their first house as a land contract, which I didn't even know what that was. I had to look it up. And they had to buy their house piece by piece. And so it was just a very interesting time that they overcame all of that and was able to raise 6 kids, in your case 7 kids, put
Right.
people through college, and get them married off. And he walked
Yes.
all 6 of us down the aisle before he passed away. I mean, to him that
Yes.
was the legacy.
And funny enough, this owning your legacy started because I was getting kind of coached and yelled at by one of my coaches that I was handing it all to my father. So it's really interesting. This is me owning it, but I know damn well he's up there clapping and excited about it. And I do think it does it shed a light on him, but it's like taking my own lane. He would have never done this. That's for
Right.
sure.
No, it's taking your lane, but taking that lane from the legacy that he built. You're building,
Right. And then, yeah,
and your
adding
family
on. Yeah.
knows what he did to get this
Hmm.
company going, and what your
Yeah.
mother did to support him to keep this company going,
God
right?
bless her. God bless
God
her.
bless the mothers. My mother too.
Yes.
My father was always talking, always in front of the microphone,
Yeah.
always being interviewed by the paper. And then at the end of one article, it said, and he married Odessa McGrady, and she works at the Rand, but they didn't like
Yeah.
give her like any, she had a job too, right?
Accolades. Right. Oh, and she's got a cute little thing over there. All right,
All
lady,
right.
well,
Well,
so
I love
good to see
you.
you. I love you too. And thank you
This
so much
was
for doing
so
this.
good.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.